don't know about you, but I've been predominantly playing Rebirth Island since the mid-season update, and outside of the TTK loadouts video that we did last week, I was taking a look at it, and truthfully, most of the loadout videos we've done here in the past or so have been predominantly based around whatever the mainline map is, whether that be Verdansk 84 back then or Caldera now, but we haven't really crafted any top 10 loadouts that you should be using to dominate within Rebirth, because while there are some crossover, there's certainly aspects of Rebirth that absolutely makes it worth building classes differently. So for today, I want to take a look at and share with you my top 10 Rebirth classes that will shred no matter what. As we go along, drop your favorite loadout down below. This isn't any particular definitive list, but instead what I find most successful of loadouts, from niche weapons to any weapon that you can pick up and do well with. Feel free to add to this list, but as well, if you enjoyed the video, do me a favor and drop a like on it. If you're new to the channel, do be sure to hit the subscribe button to help us out on that road to 500,000 subscribers, and to stay up to date with all things Call of Duty related, whether that be Warzone, maybe Modern Warfare 2 here in the near future, we got you covered. If you're interested, I'd love to have you in the community. And finally, if you'd ever like to support the channel a little further, using creator code Espresso in the in-game shop of Warzone, Vanguard, Cold War, or Modern Warfare is an entirely optional yet great way to do so. Do not ever feel pressured to, but if you ever do, tweet me a picture. I'd love to shout out some of your generous support in upcoming videos. That said, let's jump into it. So firstly, let's talk about the differences between Rebirth and Caldera briefly. For a lot of people, this may be no-brainers, but for the sake of being thorough, and for those that may not, Rebirth is a more run-and-gun heavy map. You'll see a lot more things that you want to focus on in your builds, like close quarters play with your weaponry, while also elsewhere the ability to use things like utility, heal up quicker, things that overall can allow you to play a bit more aggressive, since after all, you can respawn so long as you have that redeploy timer in solos, or you have a teammate up in duos through quads. Caldera is a bit more, shall we say, slower paced, just because it's a large world with many more gaps in between players and teams. You're going to see in Caldera a lot more favorability towards long range play, rifles that are built for control, high-powered LMGs that carry damage further at a distance. Here on Rebirth, that's not your really main priority. So at a fundamental level, when you take a look at, say, just things like your perk selection, that's where I find my first variance really. Quick Fix has been my tier 1 perk of choice here for a while, especially on Rebirth. It's been my majority used perk since it's been adjusted, where in Caldera, I'll run double time so that I can run from point A to point B a little bit quicker, but Quick Fix, especially for Rebirth, is my go-to. With the addition of healing initiated when armoring, you can start that regen process immediately, which in a lot more close quarter situations can be pretty crucial. Your tier 2 perks is something that honestly becomes a little bit more competitive within Rebirth. There's definitely play options for any of these here. For me, Restock, Tempered, and High Alert are my go-tos. Really just depends on how I want to play each game. Restock allowing me to get my stims back here, Tempered allowing me to not burn through as much ammo and get to a full max health possible a little bit quicker, and High Alert will of course let me know where players will be if they end up targeting me at all. Tier 3, that's a bit more static for me. Amped is usually my go-to, and I absolutely hate it, but it is a viable option if you want it. Combat Scout is there. I'd still take Amped personally though. Now, as for weaponry builds, again, fundamentally speaking, you want to make sure that you're playing for your close to mid-range. I'll throw a sniper build here and at the end of the video, but for the most part, we're not really going to be using a Bren or a DP for control and damage at range. We're not really going to be using too many rifles for super easy to control recoil. Instead, we're prioritizing fire rate, we're prioritizing handling and mobility, and other properties like that. So I'm going to start out with some SMGs here. First up, the MP40. The MP40's been old-reliable kind of in a sense for a lot of SMG play, but when you're playing close quarters like you are in Rebirth, it's something that honestly becomes a better pick than if you were to say in Caldera. You're oftentimes going to play to the strengths of this gun where it is close quarters. So for that, I want to prioritize fire rate, I want to prioritize any damage properties, and as an added bonus, if we can, extend that out to a little bit more mid-range. For this, we end up running the recoil booster, the short barrel, which does increase that damage range, but also offers limb damage. I personally run the ISO 1M optic, the folding stock, pistol grip, Gorenko 45 round magazine for that added fire rate, hollow point to increase that limb damage just a little further, polymer grip, unmarked, and quick. Overall, this build is going to be something that favors that mobility that really can help you out within Rebirth, but also, again, close quarters and maximizing fire rate and damage, increasing that TTK. This is the fastest TTK build you can have of the MP40, and for that, absolutely try it out on Rebirth. After that, one of the ones that has been my absolute favorite as of lately, and I'm just talking SMG overall, not necessarily even just for Rebirth in particular, that being the Type 100. Now, the Type 100 is an interesting one because it has a very high TTK, as we talked about beforehand, in close quarters, but it is something that does have the potential to kill pretty quickly at a distance and at range. For this, I'd end up recommending the recoil booster, the 374mm barrel, the slate reflector, just because I like the pinpoint precision on this one as opposed to other optics and iron sights that I've used in the past, the skeletal stock, the M1941 hand stop, the 8mm Kurz 48 round drum mag. That's where you end up getting that extra damage and where that TTK adjustment comes into play. Hollow point, hatched grip, because you are going to want to get a little bit more control on that. It has a little bit more horizontal bounce here whenever you fire, so you want to get that under control. And then acrobatic and quick as your two perks here to end up helping that mobility just as much as possible. Next, I'd still highly recommend the Owen gun. That's one that may be hit or miss for some people. Again, a little quicker of a TTK in terms of SMG play, but it's also something that, like the Milano, you have to be accurate because of that fire rate. You're going to lose out a little bit as opposed to other SMGs in that fire rate, so you might not get as many chances to land shots as your enemy. So you want to be accurate for this, but for this, I'd end up running the recoil boosters to increase that fire rate a little bit further. The Hawkinson rapid barrel, again, fire rate prioritized there. Any optic of your choice. Personally, I've run since the very beginning the M38 Slate 2.5 custom, having that pinpoint precision of a red dot, but also, if you need to, you can have a little bit more magnification. Plus, this optic actually offers a little bit more recoil control, which is definitely nice. Then I end up running the Ravenwood stock, M1941 hand stop, the Gorenko 72 round drum mag, hollow point, polymer grip, acrobatic, and quick, again, for that mobility. Another fairly standard one here in regards to SMG play that you may be familiar with, but is still a phenomenal option, is that of the well gun. For this, it is one that we've talked about here before, so we'll breeze past it, that being the recoil booster, the shrouded barrel. The GW03 optic is my optic of choice, though again, you can use the slate reflector, any other iron sight, or just really any sight that you feel comfortable with. The removed stock is something that I would highly recommend, especially on Rebirth for that added ADS speed, but also movement speed and sprint to fire speed, allowing you to get around the map a little quicker, but also allowing you to get that gun up quicker too. The M1941 hand stop is a great option here with this. The Gorenko 40 round magazine I use for that additional fire rate, outputting a little bit more rounds, increasing that TTK ever so slightly. Though I will say, if you want to use the 9mm 64 round magazines, that's not a bad option. The 40 rounds, sometimes if you're playing in trios or quads, if you have to take 2, 3, sometimes even 4 engagements if another team is pinching in on you, it does become something that's hard to manage with 40 rounds. You're reloading a little bit more often than you'd like to, so that is something that 64 isn't a half bad option, but still, again, I'd take the 40 as preference. Hollow point as the ammo type is what I run, and then fabric grip for that added ADS speed, sprint to fire speed, and hip fire accuracy, as well as our movement perks of fleet and quick. Now, before we jump over into some rifle play, I kind of want to wrap things up with the Armaguerra. This is one that I'd throw in here if you're looking for something that isn't quite necessarily meta, but still gets the job done with relative ease. This, I'd end up recommending the recoil booster, the 315mm barrel. I again like the iron sight of the MMSC, though again, that's personal preference based. The folding stock, the hand stop, the 8mm 72 round Kurz magazine for added damage, bullet velocity, and of course, more ammo. Definitely nice to have on hand. I like to run lengthened because with this, I can challenge a little bit more at a distance rather than just only up close and personal. So that's not a terrible option here with this. The fabric grip offers me additional ADS speed, sprint to fire speed, and hip fire recoil recovery. And then finally, hard scope for that additional recoil control, and quick for a little bit more mobility. Again, that one's one that maybe necessarily isn't meta SMG per se, but still gets the job done tremendously well. Actually, forgot we do have one more SMG here before we swap to any rifle and then sniper play here with this. The PPSH from Vanguard, I'd still recommend that hipfire build, especially for Rebirth, not necessarily Caldera. That being the recoil booster, 230mm barrel, slate reflector, remove stock, carbon foregrip, Gorenko 71 round magazine, hollow point, fabric grip, fleet, and quick. So try that out if you guys are at all interested. But when it comes to your rifles, we've got a few options. One that I think is a great transition weapon from SMG to long range, and probably is one of the most versatile that you have in this category, is that of the AS44. We talked about how the AS44, if you kit it out for close quarters, you kit it out for fire rate, you absolutely have one of the fastest killing weapons in the entire game as of last week's video. That still holds true, and honestly, the AS44 is one of my favorite weapons to run on Rebirth as of late, because it is something that has the damage of a rifle, but the fire rate of an SMG. Not quite the mobility just yet, but we can kind of get close. That said, for this, I'd recommend the recoil booster, the Falcon barrel, the slate reflector, the skeletal stock, the M1941 hand stop, the 7.62 Gorenko 50 round magazine, hollow point, polymer grip, sleight of hand, and then fully loaded. For this one, you cannot go wrong. This will shred your enemies, and you'll leave them wondering how in the world you killed them that fast. Now, outside of that, we have 3 other rifles that I'd like to talk about, and those honestly are some of the easiest to use, easiest to control, or the most versatile when it comes to medium and somewhat air quote a long range here at this, but if needed in a pinch, can still get the job done in close quarters. Really come down to 3 in particular, those being the AK-47, XM4, and Vargo. Those are my top 3 here for this in terms of rifle play. Of course, there are a number of different weapons you can end up choosing here in the rifle category, which, as we'll talk about in just a second, honestly, when it comes to the Rebirth air quote meta, there is so many weapons you can use. It is way healthier than the already healthy Caldera meta whenever you look at this. Like, after we finish up with these 3 builds and the sniper build, I could rattle off another 10 weapons that could easily be top weapons here that you can end up doing well with. So we'll get to those in a second, but honestly, AK-47, XM4, and Vargo all have very, very similar builds, almost identical. The only differences are that of what is in name in terms of the attachments. For the AK-47, GRU suppressor, Spetsnaz RPK barrel, axial arms 3x optic, Spetsnaz grip, and that 60-round magazine, or 45-round magazine if you don't want to sacrifice your ADS. The difference is very minimal. It's like a couple of frames, so you really won't notice it all that much. The XM4, again, very similar. You could probably guess what it is. Agency suppressor instead of GRU suppressor. Same thing, just differently named. Task Force barrel, axial arms 3x optic, field agent grip, and the 60-round magazine. And finally, the Vargo, well, I bet you could guess it. GRU suppressor, Task Force barrel, axial arms 3x optic, Spetsnaz grip, and 60-round Spetsnaz mag. Now, I choose those because they're very easy to control. They have a high damage output, not much recoil, and the rate of fire is consistent with other rifles in the category. Personally, my favorite out of these 3 is the Vargo. It's the easiest to control. It has the XM4's recoil pattern, while also having the damage, which is increased ever so slightly, of the AK-47. So those 3 honestly are phenomenal choices, though again, you can use the C58, you can use the EM2. Those are all viable options as well. Same thing goes with other Vanguard rifles as well. The Cooper is absolutely up there. I just kind of refrain from putting this one in here just because I've used it so much recently. I'm kind of just burnt out on it. But before we get to the other sort of runner-up weapons here with this, talking just for those that may be interested in sniping a little bit, I'd highly recommend the Swiss or the Kar 98K from Modern Warfare. Now, for the Swiss, I'd start out with the GRU suppressor or the sound moderator. The GRU suppressor is something that takes away a little bit from that ADS speed. The snappy nature of the Swiss is something that draws players to it, so if you run the sound moderator, you're going to end up getting a little bit more ADS speed, but the GRU suppressor gives you a little bit more in that bullet velocity and effective damage range. So it's really a trade-off that you have to gauge for yourself what you find to be worthwhile. Then I'd run the Combat Recon barrel, the SWAT 5mm laser. The Bruiser grip is something that I end up running for the movement speed and a little bit more aiming stability, as we'll talk about here in just a second with the grip. Aiming stability is absolutely something you definitely want to be conscious of, especially now with the increase of flinch on snipers as opposed to where it was in Black Ops Cold War. If you don't want to run the Bruiser grip, something that I'd highly recommend is that Raider stock for a little bit more in that sprint to fire time, but again, I'd probably take the Bruiser grip over that just for the added stability. And then the Airborne Elastic Wrap for that additional ADS speed, flinch resistance, and aiming stability. Really helps you out greatly there. And then the Kar 98K from Modern Warfare. This has been a standard since Modern Warfare, just breezing over this. The Mono Suppressor, the Singard Custom 27.6-inch barrel, the TAC Blazer, Sniper Scope, and the FTAC Sport stock. And that'll basically do it again for your top 10 Rebirth loadouts that I would recommend here. Though again, like we mentioned, there are a ton of weapons that we didn't quite mention, but are still phenomenal options. The Cooper, the Lapa, the MAC-10, the Milano, the Krig 6 has been popping up again, which is pretty cool to see. The OTS-9, the C58, the EM2, the AS-Val if you're playing solos or duos. Honestly, there is such an insanely healthy number of weapons you can end up using here if you don't want to conform to any number of these. So if there's something that we didn't quite talk about in terms of weapon build, there's absolutely a chance it's viable and can do well for you. But these are just some of my favorites. So that said, that's going to wrap it up. I'd love to get your thoughts and feedback down there in the comment section down below. Again, if there's any build that you guys would like to add to this list, feel free to. By no means is this a definitive list. It is not something that there's only going to be these ones that you'll do well with. So drop your thoughts down below. But if you enjoyed the video, do me a favor and drop a like on it. And if you're new to the channel, do be sure to subscribe button to stay up to date with all things Warzone, whether it be loadouts like this or just news and updated information as it happens. If you're interested in any of that, I'd love to have you in the community. But that said, thanks so much for watching. My name is Espresso. I'll see you guys later. Take care and peace.